Greetings, and welcome to this year's production of the Black History Program with 100 Black Men of Greater Knoxville. My name is Matthew Best.
My name is Christopher Beatty, and we at the 100 Black Men of Greater Knoxville are excited to have you join us here today in this, our third annual Black History Month program. On behalf of our chapter president, Mr. John Wright, and the Black History Month Committee, chaired by Mr. Julian Wright, with members Marquise Jordan and Todd Kelly Sr., we're excited to have you here today. We hope that this program both inspire and educate you.
We're here in Birmingham, Alabama at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, where we have the awesome opportunity to give you exclusive access to the Institute, to the artifacts, and to the CEO, Ms. DeWanna Thompson.
Come on, let's go ahead and take a step inside.
We're here with DeWanna Thompson, the president and CEO of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, and she's going to give us a brief tour, and then we're going to actually get a chance to sit down and have an interview with you.
Here at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, we have two missions mainly. One is to preserve the history of what happened specifically in Birmingham as it relates to the civil rights movement. But then our second mission is to take the strategies and the lessons learned from that era and to apply them to opportunities for human rights and human dignity today. And so we obviously understand that at the core of that is education. And so most of our programming that we do every single day is centered around investing in young leaders and their opportunities in terms of learning about the civil rights movement, but also learning about conflict resolution, critical thinking, industry, literature, different things that help them to develop into what we say a constitution around social justice, a constitution sort of around human rights and human dignity. And we do that through our legacy program, through our BCAP program, which is we start in elementary schools. So we're working in local elementary schools. We have public programming that we do every single month that engages all around the community. And then we also we have one of the largest archival spaces and research facilities of our kind. And we are able to then, if you want to learn about something, typically you go to the library or these days they Google it, but we're always so excited because we have students who come here to our archives and they can research, movements, history, particular people, and really get a different lens than what's probably in the traditional history book. And so we love to be that source for those young people and move them forward in that way.
Here we are standing at our exhibit that, as you can see, is a facility, is a church. And the reason why this is one of my favorite components of the Civil Rights Institute is because it talks about the legacy of the Black church in the civil rights movement. What most people don't know is that the church wasn't just a place of faith, it was a place of strategy. This is where many of the movement leaders would come together. It was one of the safest places that they could be during the civil rights movement that allowed them to not just get on one accord spiritually, but to really get on one accord as to how they were going to address the different issues that they were facing during that time. Here in the city of Birmingham, over 66 churches were bombed during the civil rights movement, of which only 4 of the individuals who bombed those churches were even brought to justice. And so it was the church, this particular part of our institute is one of the parts that I really, really hold dear as a person of faith, but also knowing that a church, a home, a school, all these places can be places where change happens in our local community. And we're always excited to remind people of that. You don't have to have a big old facility. You can just start where you are, start organizing where you are and where you have right in your community.
I think it's all about exposure, right? You honestly sometimes cannot become something if you have no idea that it exists. I used to tell people all the time, being from a place like Birmingham, Alabama, I knew about, the HBCUs that were very, very local, but I had never heard of a Howard until I moved to DC, like as a 22-year-old, right? And so it's just because it wasn't a part of my exposure. And so I do believe that the more opportunities we can expose our young people to, the more more leadership opportunities we can expose them to develop that leadership, to develop the values and the tenets that they need, the character of good leaders. The more we can do that within this space, we are allowing them the opportunity to then take those transferable skills into other spaces, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to all turn into an activist or, an advocate, but we do believe that those skills translate into being incredible leaders in whatever space that they find themselves in.
The right to vote is the most sacred and most precious thing that we have as a citizen. And this exhibit speaks to all of the struggles and the triumphs of those who activated for the right to vote in this country. So even today, as we are thinking about the Voting Rights Act, as we think about pioneers like Congressman John Lewis, and we think about others who understood that the right to vote is a tool of our liberation, we always encourage people to utilize that right, register to vote, to ensure that your voice is heard in the country that you live in and hopefully in the country that you love.
The youngest leader that we have in the archives or in the exhibit here is 3 years old. And we tell everybody, particularly if you have heard anything about the Children's March, it's actually the 60th anniversary of the Children's March, also known as the Children's Crusade, which were middle school, elementary school, high school students who walked out, coordinated a walkout of their high schools and their schools to protest voting rights and the issues that were happening with police brutality and all kinds of things during that time. And so they were the ones who actually kept the civil rights movement going, because it had gotten to a place, particularly in places like Birmingham, where even Dr. King had made a statement that said, it's getting too violent, right? And so they were really concerned about moving forward, and a lot of people had started to sort of sit down, and it was the students who said, no, we have got to move this. And they had that passion and that zeal, and they already knew at 9 years old, 12 years old, 14 years old, that they could make a difference, that it was their responsibility to do so. I think that there are conversations, particularly in this generation, where back in the day, it might have been a conversation that you only had at home, right? And now they're like, no, let's have the conversation. They're very much about getting the information, telling the truth, and calling folk out. You can do it in love, but I do think that that shift is incredible, and I love to see how this generation is really taking on that kind of perspective. Man, yes. So first of all, we have the actual jail cell, the bars from when Martin Luther King Jr. wrote the letter from a Birmingham jail. We have the actual bar cells. We have the stool that was in his cell, as well as the sink that was in his cell. And in there, sometimes when it's a very significant moment, we will, just like MLK Day, we will have someone recite in the frame in the letter from the Birmingham jail, and you can't the chills that go through you, and just that it just never gets old, and it reminds us that even in the lowest places you can make a difference. Your voice can make a difference. That speech is still considered one, or that letter is still considered one of his most prominent works.
So here we are at perhaps our most sacred artifact here in the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. This is the actual jail cell, the bars from the jail cell where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote his famous letter from a Birmingham jail. Obviously, when we think about this opportunity, this moment that he had, where he was in probably one of the lowest spaces or lowest conditions one can find himself, the fact that he found and had enough courage and hope and presence of thought to utilize that moment to still birth something as significant as the Birmingham letter from a Birmingham jail. We take that to remind us that at any moment that we find ourselves, there's still hope. There's still an opportunity to use your voice. In that letter, he wasn't challenging those who were on the sidelines. He was challenging his own colleagues to step up and do what is right. He was asking them to activate urgently on behalf of justice. And so today I ask you in that same spirit to activate urgently for justice. And here we are at our Bus Ride to Freedom exhibit. Here we talk about the courageous leaders who got on buses for the freedom rides to try to make a statement about the fact that of what was going on in this country as it relates to race relations. These were young people who left colleges from the north and the south, the east and the west, got on buses to try to tell the government that this is not right. And in that action, they were bombed. And so as you go through this exhibit with us today, you'll see remnants of a burned bus and some of the names. What I love about this particular exhibit is that there are so many people in the civil rights movement that you will never know their names, but it was their action that got us justice. It's their action that got us to some level of equality. And so when you think about the countless people who rode the freedom buses, remember that there's someone in your community, perhaps even in your family, and think about your own story of any time you've stood up for something that you believe in, and know that if you continue to move forward, if you continue to use your voice, justice, freedom, equality, it is possible.
In there's also a video that is live footage from the time of that era, and there are young people, black and white, on that video who are saying, after they had been bombed and they are in the hospital in the video, saying, we're gonna get better and get back out there on the bus. You can't teach that. You know, it is it's a constant reminder at how people put their bodies on the line for what they believed in the face of just, unimaginable and unthinkable violence. And they said that they would do it again. Well, you have to kind of understand that Dr. King was also informed, or his theories and those within the movement, where their theories were informed by strategies that they had seen work in other places, whether it was Mahatma Gandhi, whether it was Nelson Mandela. They were informed by this idea that nonviolence really allowed you to actually be in control, because a lot of times when you act out in a violent way, or you act out in any kind of way, you're acting out of emotion, not out of strategy. The theory of nonviolence centers the idea that I can be emotional, I can be moved to action, but my emotion is not driving my strategy, right? And so, and I would say that even when we think about nonviolence, it's not that the Black Panthers were an ultra-violent group. They got painted it that way, but that's not the case. There's still the idea that, when I get activated around something, if you already see me as a violent person, it doesn't matter what I do, you're gonna find that to be violent, which is why the act of nonviolence, the act of love, the act of literally showing that I'm not going to operate in that way was so powerful and still is today. So we definitely have a ton of things that are not on display, but I would say that one of the cool things that we've been doing are pop-up exhibits in neighborhoods and at schools, where we take items that are not on display and take those out and do a lesson plan around them. So one of probably I would say the most poignant for me, that kind of moves me right now, is a lot of people know that there were 4 little girls who were bombed at 16th Street Baptist Church, but not many people know that there were 2 young men that were killed that same day. And so we actually have some artifacts that speak to what happened to them specifically. And it's so important for me for their stories to be told. And so we are actually creating a new exhibit around them. But that is one of, or those artifacts that tell their story is one that had not been on display, and that we're excited to be able to bring to light. One is seeing how there was a role for everyone, right? And knowing that, just because you may not exist in a certain kind of way, or just because you may not be ready to be on the front line, if you are someone that's good at math, there's room for you. If you are someone who's good at prayer, there's room for you. If you are an artist, there's room for you. And I think that when you go through the exhibits, you see so many of the different ways that people made a difference based on their skill set, their God-given talent, the things that they were concerned about. Not everything moves everybody the same. You know, I was telling someone the other day that I have a big concern about food injustice. And so for me, when I see that, it just moves me different than perhaps some other things. And so it's not that one thing is more important than the other, it's just that some things move us differently. And so I think that's one thing you will learn as you go through the Institute. I think the other thing is the commitment to always educating oneself. At every single step of every single movement, activation, whatever, there was a strategy session, there was a learning session. You weren't just walking out and didn't know what you were walking into. Somebody already had the money getting ready to bail people out. There was an educational component to every single part, and that is the responsibility that we should take on when we get ready to activate, is educating ourselves as much as we possibly can, and then operating from a strategic mindset.
Thank you so much for the time today.
Yes.
This was a pleasure.
Thank you.
We hope that today's conversation and some of the images have challenged you, encouraged you, and kind of caused you to think a little bit more about our future. We have some discussion questions for you wherever you may be to kind of further this discussion. But we also want to let you know that you can go to 100bmok.org to find out about the Avon Rollins Scholarship that's now open. High school seniors can apply and write their essays to receive a $1,000 scholarship. So until next time, thank you so much for your time today.